Good afternoon and welcome to this week's edition of the People Progressing podcast. And I just told Coach Hines, this is really a treat for me. I've been following Coach on Twitter for a long, long time. Uh, we'll get into that here in a little while, but his stuff on Twitter and what he does for people in coaching and in leadership and all of the above is amazing to me. So having you on is a true treat for me, Coach. And I really start out my podcast by just asking my guests to kind of describe where you grew up, how you grew up, things that were influential in your life to kind of help you get to where you are now.
Absolutely, Joe. I appreciate you having me on. It is honestly humbling to be here with you. So I appreciate you taking the time. I grew up in small town Barrington, Rhode Island. I was raised by two God-fearing, God-loving parents. As I mentioned off camera, so to speak, just lost my father about 3 weeks ago, and was blessed to have him for 50 years. I'm dating myself, but 50 years. And he taught me a lot about life. And I was a typical high school student athlete with a chip on my shoulder and not in a good way. I loved life, loved football, and for too many years loved partying. So spent a lot of time drinking and getting arrested and getting in trouble. And the reason I share that right out of the
Wow.
gates is I'm a firm believer that people can change if people want to change. And that's one of my greatest, callings as a coach is I love the word empower. If I'm blessed enough as a teacher and as a football coach to be able to stand before young men and young women and share my passion for life and football and what I teach, and every day is a gift. So put my parents through a lot of nonsense growing up. They were always there for me and tough love and always had my back and held me accountable when they needed to, and they needed to a lot growing up. Went to school at Plymouth State College in New Hampshire, played Division III football. And I share that because I tell our students, I just met with one of our players a few minutes ago who has potential to play Division I. I never had that potential. I wasn't that good. I wasn't that fast. So I played Division III football, and I loved it because I tell our players, if you love football, don't go somewhere so your girlfriend or your parents can wear that sweatshirt.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go somewhere where you can compete, not easy, but where you can compete to be better and make something happen. From there, my wife and I got married young, 22 years old. Started coaching my third year after teaching. So I'm currently heading into my 25th or 26th year of coaching high school football. I was a head coach in New Hampshire for 7 years. And we can get into the details of that a little bit if you want to or not. But moved out here to San Diego 7 years ago when my wife and I had our first grandson. And now our two grandsons live 2.5 miles down the road from us, come to all the football games. And I'm blessed.
Well, let's go back a little bit when you were talking about some of the partying days. What was there one specific event that kind of made you get away from that? That kind of changed you a little bit?
Great question. And I don't know if you dug deep and did some research and know the answer or not, but my parents were on vacation. Every parent wants to go away once in a while and have a break from their kids.
Right.
I was that young man that they went away and I had a party at the house. Police ended up coming. My brother called the police, and he should have. I was out of control. My brother, who's 3.5 years older, I ended up getting in a fight with my brother in front of the police officers. As they tried to pull me off of him, I ended up getting into a fight and punching and hurting, unfortunately. I have nothing but respect for our law enforcement. At that time, as a young 18-year-old, got into a fight with 3 police officers and ended up having 3 felonies, 3 years probation. Through the grace of God and some other things that happened legally, those felonies were lowered to simple assaults. And it's funny though, Joe, I ended up going back to college, and I was on probation. So I remember I had to call my probation officer whenever we had an away football game. And I thought, what a hassle.
Yeah.
But I still didn't grow up yet. And it wasn't until I went to University of Rhode Island. I went to a college party there from Plymouth State and got arrested for a fight there. Was held overnight, and the following morning, the chief of police called me into his office, and he's like, "Hey, I talked to Officer Young." Now, Officer Young was my buddy in high school, my starting quarterback. I played center. It was his father.
Okay.
So I'm sitting in this police chief's office, and he said, "Hey, I got a call from officer, or I believe he was a chief himself at that time, Young, in Barrington, Rhode Island." And he said, he said, "You're one of the greatest young men he's ever met." And I was
Wow.
like, "Well, thank you." And he said, "Everyone, like, teachers love you, the coaches love you, the community loves you." And he goes, "He told me you messed up three of his police officers pretty bad." And I was too ignorant at the time to see where he was going with this, but I was pretending to be humble. And he said, "So tell me what happened." I was like, "Well, I just made some bad mistakes. And I did this." And he goes, "No, tell me the dirt." Like, I believe he really wants to know about the fight. So I started telling him the details. And about halfway into it, he slammed his fist on the desk, shocked the heck out of me, scared me. And I'm so glad he did. I wish I remember this gentleman's name, but I'm paraphrasing, but he said something, Joe, that will always stuck with me. He said, "Do you know how many good people are in prison for the rest of their lives because they couldn't grow up and they couldn't just get their crap together, so to speak?"
Wow.
Um, and it really woke me up. Um, and I thought, what am I doing? What am I doing with my life? Got married at 22 and decided there. We've been married, my wife and I, now for 28 years, have 4 children, 2 grandsons. But the first year of marriage, I remember thinking to myself, I don't ever want, I had this vision of walking down the stairs and hearing my wife talking to our children that we didn't have yet. We had our
Yeah.
first
Yeah.
daughter. Um, and apologizing for dad's behavior when he was drunk. And I thought, I don't ever want to make my wife have that conversation and have the heartbreaking for my children, for my wife. So I quit drinking. I quit drinking and haven't been arrested since, haven't been to a fight since. Um, that was that moment when that police chief cared enough me, for me, instead of just having me stay a few more nights or whatever it was, to really take the time to have that conversation with me. And I share that story not freely and openly with every player, but when I have a player that's battling something, going through something, I don't believe coaches or teachers or parents can change others. But I do believe that if we do it with the right intent, with the right heart, we can empower them to make the change for themselves.
Mhm.
Um, so I look at my life now. I often say I'm an expert in nothing, and I don't mean that humbly. I'm not an expert, but I'm passionate about most things, and I'm passionate first and foremost. I love everything about the game of football, from the game planning to the breaking down film to practices, the training in the weight room. But I'm more passionate about the people
Yeah.
and truly getting people to see their potential, and then getting them to help others and bless others.
Yeah. And I think that's part of our job as a coach. One of the main jobs as a coach is to help our players find out what their true gifts are,
Yeah.
but then to help and guide them to use those gifts in the service of others.
Amen. Yeah.
And when I watch you do this and I watch the stuff that you put out on social media and stuff, that's what you do on a daily basis because that's what someone did for you.
Yeah.
You talk about that one man basically changed the whole trajectory of your life. And that's what I want people to get. One of the things out of this podcast is as leaders, no matter if it's in business, it's in sports, it's whatever it might be, you have that power to change someone's life. Not, not, and I 1000% agree with you when you said, I don't think we can change people. I have a saying that says, I don't think we can motivate people, but I do think we can inspire people to motivate themselves.
Yeah.
And it's kind of this along the same lines of what you're just talking about. How do we inspire people to change? Because they're the one who has to own it. So they're the ones who have to, we're not trying to change people, but we want them to look at things differently or inspire them in a way that can help them. And just like that police officer did with you, he inspired you to look at things differently. So then you had the wherewithal when you had a child or before you even had kids to think that far in the future. When I have kids, do I want my wife apologizing to my kids for me being drunk?
Right.
Most people don't have that wherewithal, but you're giving that to other people now. And that's, I think that's one of the great things about being a leader. Um, let's talk a little bit about your leadership. What are, if you could name 3 top things of being a great leader, what would your top 3 be?
I'm going to cheat first and give the quick answer, and then your audience can delete me and not follow me, and then I'll go a little deeper. relationships, relationships, relationships.
Okay.
Now I'm cheating by saying those are all three. I'll start with just relationships. When I first got my first head coaching job in New Hampshire, I was interviewed by the principal and the athletic director. And the second interview, they said it was a very affluent community in Bedford, New Hampshire, a lot of business owners, doctors, lawyers, such, and they expected success. And they said, Coach, if you get this job, how long before you're in the playoffs? And I wasn't arrogant. I don't think, at that time, I don't think I am now. But without skipping a beat, Joe, I said 3 to 5 years we'll be in the playoffs. And they both laughed at me. And two thoughts I had that I'll never forget. Immediately I thought, let's go, game on, like give me a chance.
Yeah, you're competitive.
Because I'm competitive.
Yeah.
And then right behind that thought, I thought to myself, they're both laughing at me in the interview. I just lost this job. I didn't get it. I ended up getting the job. And I'll say this very quickly without speaking too quickly. My first year as head coach in New Hampshire, we set records in the state of New Hampshire, but they weren't the records you want to set. I jokingly say that. We got our teeth kicked in more my first year as a head coach, lost every game so bad that at the end, I don't respectfully care if it's baseball, football, whatever sport it is. At the end of every game, those two teams meet in the middle of that field, rink, mat, whatever it is, court. They shake hands and they say, good game.
Yeah.
We were so bad, Joe, that no one even lied to us. They would shake my hand, the other coaching staff, and say, great field, beautiful stadium. I'm like, man, we're that bad. We're that bad. But what happened there, we went from losing every game my first year as a head coach to winning 2 games my second year. And I was being questioned and doubted by almost everyone and their mothers, and I should have been. Third year, we made the playoffs. We got bounced out right away, but we made it there. My last 4 years as head coach in New Hampshire, we, not I, but we, coaches, players, families, built a powerhouse. We went to the state championship 3 out of my last 4 years, each time in a higher division, and it had 144 young men in the program.
Yeah.
So the reason I say that, and to go back to your question about a leader, when I took the head coaching job here in Coronado 6 years ago, my old line coach from New Hampshire, who took over the program when I left, called me the following Saturday of our first game. He knew we had lost badly. He said, hey, coach, you've been there before. Like, how long do you think? And I said, Derek, you're going to hate this answer. He goes, what? I said, one relationship at a time.
Yeah.
And I had grown enough myself to realize that I'm not, when someone asks me for success, my definition of success is different than I think the great majority of the world's right now. And B, I'm not putting a timestamp on that. It's one relationship at a time. If your son or daughter, we have 2 young women in our program now, can come into our fold, into our program, and I can selflessly serve them and love them and have them know that they're loved, not because of what they can produce for me or our team, but just because of who they are as human beings, they're going to go home with a smile on their face after a tough practice, after being beat up by their teammates, whatever it may be. But the parents are going to see that.
Yeah.
And that's how you create buy-in. So I think qualities of a great leader, I think relationships. Yes, X's and O's, whatever terminology we want to use for whatever sport we coach, you have to know your game. You have to win a certain number of games. But it goes down to relationships. And then I think it goes down to knowing, well, I might even put this first. I'm breaking my own rule. Knowing our why. A mistake I made early on in my coaching career was I knew my why. I knew what my why was. I didn't effectively even think about communicating it with our coaching staff or with our players. So knowing my why, allowing and helping our coaches and our players to know their why and relationships. So I guess those would be my 3. And I think that's so important because you mentioned you've been to Coronado. You have a buddy that's the head coach at San Diego State for the baseball program. I think one of the biggest misunderstandings is of people that play us or people whose young men and young women play for us is they think, well, it's Coronado. What stress do they have? It's one of the greatest places in America, if you ask me. Way too many people don't understand that there are behind $1 million doors and properties. There's anxiety, there's depression, there's drug abuse, there's neglect, there's you name it, and that's not lost on me. So I think the more we can get to know the student athletes as individuals, the more they're going to realize that relationship is not just transactional, but transformational. And the more they're going to want to produce, not just for us, but for themselves.
Yeah. And I think so many great points there. And when I think about it, I call it, are you a data coach or are you a people coach? Data coaches coach for the wins and losses and in the records and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not saying they're not good coaches or not good for kids. I'm not saying that. But for me, my definition of success for our program was always, where are my kids going to be 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30 years from now? Are we going to still be in touch? Are they going to be good husbands and fathers? Are they going to be good community members? If they come to work for somebody, are they going to be the best worker they have because they've learned that through our process? Um, and I think in this day and age, it's getting harder and harder to be that type of a coach, because we have gotten so individualized in our country, and we've gotten so data driven in our country, that it's really hard to do that. But I try to tell people this, try to tell young coaches, if you take care of the relationships and you build that rapport with your players and you do those things, the winning will take care of itself.
100% agree.
And that's where a lot of people get lost, is they get, and I've been there. I became a data coach for a little bit in my career, and I was miserable, and I'm sure my players were miserable. And I probably don't have great relationships with some of those players during that period of time. And it took some things to get me back into, I call it my purpose. You just bring up so many good points. You mentioned your definition of success. What is your definition of success?
Yeah, as cliche as it may sound, and I want to touch base on something you mentioned. First, my definition of success is changing one life at a time.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a great, but and you mentioned something about, the world we live in now is so driven on, so it's so divided, which it is, whether it's politically or religiously, whatever it is. One of my best friends that I met coaching out here in San Diego, he and his wife, we traveled together and vacation with them. He wanted me to apply for a job at a different school about 2 years ago. They had a athletic director and head coaching position open, and we were walking on the beach one time, and this friend of mine, I won't say his name, but has been through hell and back in his personal life, in his career, and now is kind of back on top, if you will, as far as he owns 5 companies, and you would never know it, humble, salt of the earth person. But he's like, Kurt, you got to apply for this job. I'm like, why? He's like, do you realize how much money? And we're walking right now. Our wives are sitting back in the chairs. So we're walking. He goes, do you know how much money you'll make? And I stopped and I looked at him. I'll say his name, Michael. He's one of my best friends. I said, Mike, I said, that's not my definition of success. I said, so let's just pretend I'm making, and I threw out the number amount, $130,000, which is a lot more than I make now. I said, so what? So I'll have more in savings, less time with my wife. Have a bigger house, less time with my wife. Have another nicer car, less time with my grandsons. So for me, I think going through the process of knowing our why has got to come down to who we are. And I don't want to get preachy to you or to your audience, but my faith means everything to me. Mm-hmm. I know who I am, I know whose I am, and I know why I'm here. I know why I've been sent here. So my definition of success is changing one life at a time. And I was just meeting with our starting quarterback, as I mentioned prior to our hopping online here, and just pouring into him about, taking certain players under his wing.
Yeah.
And he knows it. He understands servant leadership. He understands about leaving a legacy. And I think way too many people miss that point and think that defining success is just by our bank account, by the clothes we wear, the house we live in, the cars we drive, and what the scoreboard says. Mm-hmm. I would much rather win a game 21-20, having gut in as many players as we can, than win 56-0 and never taking our starters out.
Yeah.
And I would much rather have, as much as this pains me to say this, a 5-5 season with all of our student athletes being academically eligible and each one knowing that they're cared for and loved by their coaches and teammates, and going undefeated, but kids falling through the cracks, and those kids that may not be starters feeling like we wouldn't notice that they showed up.
So let me ask you this. Such great points. What is your why?
My why is to empower as many people as I can.
Okay.
It's and I feel so blessed. I don't like the word lucky, but for lack of better words, feel lucky. I feel like those of us that coach, we're the lucky ones. Mm-hmm. Teachers, coaches, how many people do we know? And I'm sure, in your coaching career and your days around baseball and other sports, I've had so many family members and friends say to me, if I could do what you do. Mm-hmm. And I look at them, and I don't do it to push buttons. I'm like, you can.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
you'd have to sacrifice those 3 cars you have and go down
Yeah.
to 2.
Yeah.
You might have to sell that beach house you have and just live in 1.
Yeah.
But I know, when my father passed away 3 weeks ago, heartbroken. I was a mess and still going through that process. And as I
Yeah.
mentioned to you, we're going to Rhode Island for his celebration of life in a few weeks. I have 0 regrets because I put my father through hell as a teen growing up. But as I matured a little bit, and I think all of us, that when we become parents of our own, we realize how smart our parents were and how much
Yeah.
we needed to learn.
Yeah.
I have 0 regrets with my relationship with my father because I told him I loved him all the time. He told me all the time. He made me a better man, and in ways he had told me before, I made him a better man through different things. I want to go to my grave. I want to go to my deathbed knowing that I used every bit of talent that God gave me. And as a coach now, going into my 26th year, I've been blessed to win championships. A part of it as an assistant coach, as a head coach. But that pales in comparison when you get that letter from a former player saying, "Hey, we had our first child," or "Hey, coach, I know you're in California. The wedding's here in New Hampshire,
Yeah.
but want to let you know we're getting married and stuff." And it's my definition of success is my why is the same as my definition of success. Empower as many people as I can.
Yeah. And there's so many things that come at us to try to take it. I call it trying to take us out of our purpose.
Yeah.
My purpose is to help people grow and progress on a daily basis. And that's what it was as a coach. But there's so many things that come at us that are enemies of that try to take us out of that really frustrates me sometimes. It's like, and how do we understand what those things are and how do we fight them off to stay in our purpose? I think one of the challenges we have as a coach or as a leader is staying and living in our purpose,
Yeah.
because of so many things are coming to try to pop that purpose and get in there and try to get you out of it. And that happened to me as a coach. I mean, it happened to me. Like I said, I became a data-driven coach, and it wasn't my purpose, and I had to get back into my purpose. And when I did, then it was a lot more fun for me, and I'm sure it was a lot more fun for my coaches and players and everyone else involved. Where are you guys at now? Where your team is? You're going to have a pretty good team this year. What's your definite success for your team?
Great question. First and foremost, our goal, we do weekly grade checks. I want to make sure, well, it's not, I shouldn't say first and foremost. One of the top 3 is academic eligibility. I want to make sure the players are truly student athletes. So we do weekly grade checks. I think my number one goal for our team, and we had a coaches meeting a few nights ago. It's an intangible really, but it's just the atmosphere and the chemistry when an outsider walks into our program and hears and feels the love and the energy and the commitment. I lost 2 coaches last year. One unfortunately got divorced, and one's fiance broke up with him. So both those men moved out of state. In the process of trying to find 2 coaches, I interviewed 11, found 6 great young men. Not 2 of them aren't that young, but 6 coaches that were great. Have them on staff, some paid, some full-time volunteers. One of those young men is out of the Marines. He was in the Marines for a few years, and he didn't share this with me in the interview process, and that's a whole nother discussion for another time. But he came up to me after the second workout, and "Coach, can I talk to you?" I said, "Sure, what's up?" And he goes, "This is unlike anything I've ever been around before." And he played football all growing up, played all 4 years in high school. He goes, "Just the way you talk to the players and the way the players talk to each other and stuff." And that meant and means the world to me, because a new coach in our staff who had only been to 2 workouts was able to
Mhm.
feel the love and feel just the energy. So I think that's one of my greatest goals, is to have every member of our program, from player to coach's wife to booster president to the trainers, managers, feel like they're part of something greater than themselves. I had a practice about 2 or 3 years ago. I had a sense that some of our captains were feeling they were more deserving and better than the team. They weren't being servant leaders, and that fell on me because I thought maybe I'm not leading. So at the end of one of our practices, I asked our whole team. They were kind of gathered up around us. They had all taken a knee, and the coaches were standing around me and to the side of me. I said, "Who's the most important coach in the staff?" And so people pointed at me and several coaches. I said, "Heck no." I said, "Listen, the day I think I'm better than any other coach in the staff as a head coach, I need to hang up my whistle and stop coaching." I said, "Who are the most important players?" I said, "There aren't." Guys, I said, "It might sound cliche." I said, "But when you join a team, it doesn't matter your title. None of us are greater than the whole. You
Mhm.
have to understand and selflessly serve those we're blessed to lead. Now I make sure every time we have our captains that are voted by their teammates, that I meet with them on the regular to make sure they understand that they're the first ones to walk off the field for the coin toss on Friday nights. And that's a great honor and privilege and moments they'll probably never forget. But they're also every practice the last people to walk off the field besides myself to make sure everything's picked up. To understand that great leaders, first and foremost, are great servants.
Yeah.
They love and serve others. And I think the world at large has that backwards. I think they think, well, leaders are at top and they tell everyone what to do and whatever it is. And I know I'm preaching to the choir, but I think leadership comes from relationships and understanding the value in selflessly serving others.
Mhm. Yeah. And I have a saying that you'll find your purpose when your purpose is greater than yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that's so true. And we get a chance to do that. I'm going to kind of change directions a little bit. You had a tweet said, if anyone ever tries to tell you that you need to specialize in one sport in order to be great, and then you said, ask them this one question. What's that one question?
Yeah. Are they selfish or ignorant? Ignorant or selfish? I forget how I worded it. I will die on that hill.
Me too.
Absolutely. We've got a number of our players I haven't seen all summer. I know I'm going to see them Saturday for equipment pickup, but I haven't seen them once. And I'm 100% fine with that because they're traveling for rugby or lacrosse or baseball or basketball, whatever it is. I truly believe, and all too often we talk about, hey, look at the pros and this guy played multiple sports. And yes, that's true. There are a lot of professional athletes that were multi-sport athletes in high school and some in college. But the great majority, I feel like we, myself included as coaches, always throw out numbers that fit our agenda, whether it's
Yeah.
2%,
Yeah.
5%, whatever it is, a very small percent of high school student athletes, male and female, go on to play college sports. And I think it's sometimes with good intentions, but misguided parents, personal trainers, or coaches lie to our student athletes and say, listen, you
Mhm.
want to be a great football player, can't risk getting hurt in basketball. You don't want to roll your ankle. Can't get, hey, if you're a quarterback, if you start throwing baseballs the wrong way, and we
Yeah.
lie to them, I do think the majority of people that do it are ignorant or selfish. I think we
Yeah.
need to replace. Listen, I've had players before that have come to me and said, Coach, I'm doing track right now. I know you said it'd be great for me, but I'm not enjoying it. I said, great, don't run anymore. Don't throw anymore. Here's what you do. Talk to your parents, make sure they agree with you. Go see your coach. Don't text him or call him or text her or call her. Go to her face to face, shake their hand, look in the eye and say, thank you so much. I'm not passionate about this. And then follow your passions. Yeah, I think you can be a great football player or basketball, baseball, you name the sport, and you name the other sports player in
Mhm.
multiple sports. Um, Gosh, how quickly does life happen when, for those of us that choose, I don't think college is for everyone, for a lot of people, but not everyone. But how quickly does life happen to us, and we find ourselves at 23 or 24, and all of a sudden we're an adult in what people call the real world, and our playing days are over.
Mhm.
And we look back and like, man, I wish I would have given this a try or that a try. I I think more and more coaches and parents and trainers need to really support the passions of those we're blessed to coach and not push our own agendas on them.
Totally agree. And I call it fear regret.
Mhm.
My job as a coach was to make sure when my kids were 10, 15, 20 years from when I coached them that they didn't have regret. And the regret of not playing another sport, or the regret of not working hard enough, or not regret of not having a process to get the best they could be and winning that process. So everything was based on fear regret. You got to work your butt off so you don't have that regret later on in life, because we both know that's a horrible thing to have.
So, amen. I want to share a quick story that just happened this morning. We had our last workout before we start doubles, and we do this thing not often, but maybe once a week, where I take out some of the cheerleading mats or wrestling mats, and we have two players. They have this very long, calf high socks, and we tie one around each player's, two at a time, ankles, and we call it GTS. It's just get that sock. And I say there are only
Oh,
three rules. You can't Mike Tyson them. You can't bite them. You can't punch them, and you can't pick them up and drive them to the ground. But it's a very violent, competitive thing, and the young men love it. And I told everyone at the start of this, I said that I'm a firm believer that there's two types of competitors in the world: those who compete because they're told to. Hey, Joe, come on up here, compete. Kurt, come on up, and we're like, all right, we do it, and we do it, and we go hide back behind the numbers again. Or the people that are just, it's in their blood. They just love competing. And I had a young woman who just joined our program a week and a half ago, who the first time we did this, We said, "Hey, Avery, come out." And she said, "No, no, no." And you could see like the fear in her eyes right
Yeah.
away. No, we're good. We're good. I didn't want to embarrass her and bring the, negative pressure to her, but I think pressure can be a great thing. So today, without even calling her out to the mat, before I knew it, she was on the mat ready to go. She lost to another young woman on her team. But she said to me at the end of practice, she goes, "Coach, you see me out there?" Which I love because I was on the mat with them. I said, "Yes, I did." She goes, "I know I got my butt kicked, but I said, Avery, I don't care about that. I said,
Yeah.
you were out there." And I had
Right.
another young man, a freshman, same thing, hadn't been in there, got in today, lost, but everyone was cheering him on afterwards. I said, "Guys, life is tough. Life is hard." And one of my biggest pet peeves in the weight room is when you see someone lifting a lot of weight. I don't care whatever that weight number is for you or I or our players,
Yeah.
anything that's challenging and people yell light work, light work. I'm like, it's not light work. This is hard work. This is
Yeah.
heavy. And take pride in the fact that most people in today's society avoid hard work. They avoid competing because when you compete, there's always a chance to lose.
Yeah.
And I just get amped up about that because I don't care if our young men win or lose. I just care that they get to the point where they love competing. Because
Yeah.
that's something that I think they can carry with them throughout their entire lives.
No doubt. And
Piece this together.
yeah. So let's go, let's kind of go with that too. The competing, that's why I love my guys playing more than one sport, because life is competing.
Yeah.
And if I had a baseball player that played football, it's two different types of competition. And the more competition we can give them, the better off they're going to be in life. It's all based on that for me as a coach. It was all based on where they're going to be 10, 20, 30 years from now. How can we set our players up for success, not only now when they're playing for us, but for later on when they're out in the real world. And that's really and I say this too, Coach. I think as a leader, as a coach, and when we look at coaching in athletics, or we look at being a CEO of a business or whatever, I wish that we could take that attitude into the business world in terms of, hey, when I'm leading this company and my workers are working for me, I want them to be successful 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now. Because I think the business world is really data driven as well. It's not so much people driven as well. What advice would you give somebody who's a business owner or business leader in terms of leadership?
Be the leader you wish you had.
Oh,
I,
awesome.
I think so often, and I've made this mistake myself. I think so often we look at coaches, and I'll tie this into the business world, or look at other people in our field of business and think, hey, they've been doing it for 10 years. They're better than the one that's done it for 2 years, or they've been doing it for
Hmm.
30 years. And sometimes you have a coach, I'll take football, for example, that's been coaching for 20 years, but he coached under some jackwagon that used players for their own agenda and didn't love them and lead them the right way. So the first thing I think you would do is say, be the leader you wish you had. And sometimes that's a humbling question, because sometimes if you really ask yourself what, in order for us to be the leader we wish we had, it requires us to do some soul searching. We have to say, hey, what type of leader am I? Would I want to say the words? I've been around, and I won't mention programs, but I've been around programs where the head coach or the person in charge says all the right things behind closed doors when there's administration or parents around.
Yeah,
They
they
get in front
don't
of
live it.
players, you're like, whoa, wait a minute, it's completely different. And I think everyone says, oh, I want a coach to give back. They have the interview answers. I want a coach to make a difference, or they want to be a leader of a business or start their own business because they say they want to make a difference. And then they lose their purpose, as you mentioned. They lose sight of what their why is, however we want to phrase it. And they even unintentionally start using people as opposed to serving people.
Yeah, yeah,
And I think
yeah.
the greatest coaches I've ever coached with, as I've been an assistant coach, were servant leaders. Whether they understood that term or not, they just knew how to be servant leaders. Um, yeah, I would ask yourself, are you the leader you wish you had?
I think that's an awesome way to look at that. And it kind of goes to my next question. You have an acronym for ego. Can you go
Oh,
over
yeah.
that?
Well,
I
yes,
love this. I love this.
I do too. And please let me start by saying it is not my own. I was shared a book by a friend, and it was Dr. Wayne Dyer.
Wayne
Uh,
Dyer's awesome.
love his stuff. I believe he passed away 6 or 7 years ago, but
Yeah,
unbelievable. I always thought, Joe, ego for me was that cocky, arrogant
yeah.
coach or player that just thought they were better than everyone else.
Right, right,
And
right.
there's still some validity to that. the way Wayne Dyer, so I'm taking it from him, got to give him credit, said ego is anytime we ego, edge God out. And for me, that's huge because are you familiar with Inky Johnson?
Oh, I love Inky.
So I have yet to meet that man. I hope I do.
I would love to meet him too.
Yeah. And the reason I bring him up is when I started getting asked to speak at places that weren't football clinics, businesses, companies, schools, my first thought always was, who am I? I'm not Inky Johnson.
I know.
I was not going to the NFL. I didn't have a life-changing, altering injury. And I realized that my ego, my edging God out, was really limiting my success. And by limiting my success, I was limiting my impact on others.
Wow.
I realize now that I don't need to have Inky Johnson's story or so-and-so's story or Joe's story. I know who I am and whose I am. And if someone reaches out to me to speak, whether to an audience of 500 or there's a song I love called Audience of One. If it's an audience of one, if I can pour into someone else and have them walk away taking one thing away to make them a better husband, wife, mother, father, athlete, coach, teacher, you name it, then I lived a life well served. And I think we need to let go of our ego. If God opens a door for us, realize it's open for a reason, and to go through it not cocky but confidently, knowing that we have more ability than we may give ourselves credit for. Or sometimes we walk through a door that we're not fully prepared for, and those my first year as a head coach, those painful seasons in our life, literally or figuratively, if we allow them to become tools of teaching us, are going to become that we look back on. I still look back at my first year as a head coach and say it was my greatest coaching year ever. It was not my most enjoyable. It sucked. It sucked.
No, I get it. Yeah.
But it solidified my why. And for me, the biggest thing was being an assistant coach at any level requires great dedication, sacrifice, and love.
Yeah.
Being a head coach is a lot more work, a lot more responsibility. And for me, that first year in Bedford, losing every game, I had to look myself in the mirror every day and say, why am I doing this? What is my why? And my why for being a head coach, and I want to make sure no one misunderstands this, is to have power. And what I mean by that is to have the power to hire the men or women side by side with me, because I think the world's overpopulated with guys that know baseball, know football, know basketball, but they don't understand how to communicate that to people. And I have hired some people over the years that knew a lot of football, but didn't know people or care to know people. And now my hiring process is completely different, where I want to know about you first. What makes you tick? What lights you on fire? What's your why? And then my second interview, I always ask them to come into the weight room. And they said, well, what do you want me to do? Like, whatever you want. I'm going to be training the guys. You can sit back and just watch. You can talk to players. You can work out with them. Because I've noticed over the years, everyone says, I want to get back. I want to make a difference. And then sometimes they come to the weight room and I see them talking to that tiny little kid that can barely lift the 45-pound bar and to the stud. And I'm like, yep, that's someone I want my stud.
Yeah.
And I've had people with great coaching resumes who say all the right things, who when I watch them in the weight room, go right to those studs, walk by those kids that look a little too heavy or a little bit too small, and never give them the time of day. And right there, it answers the question for me, like that we're not the right program for them, because I want someone that's a people person first and foremost.
Oh, I love that. And I'm going to go back to the edging God out part of it. And you're talking about what we call the imposter syndrome when you, like when you go speak and am I good enough? I'm not Inky Johnson. I didn't, have an NFL career on the horizon. And who am I to speak to these people and stuff? What made you break through that? What made you get through that?
I love that question, Joe. Full transparency, I'm not even fully there yet. Yeah. I it's still for me. It's I'm there some days I'm not. I was asked. It was very humbling and funny story for me. Prior to 2020, prior to the pandemic, I get a direct message on Twitter from some gentleman. I wasn't following him yet. He said, "Coach, I followed you for years. We'd love to have you fly you out to the Bahamas, you and your wife, and pay you to speak for our company." It was ADT Security. I thought it was like one of those emails we get from someone from Uganda that says, "Hey, we want to put money into your bank account. Just give me your information," and we just delete it.
Yeah.
So I ended up responding, said, "Hey, thank you so much. Here's my business email. Please, let's connect through there." Didn't think I'd ever hear back. 24 hours later, got an email back. We set up a Zoom call, and I asked this gentleman and his boss. He and she were both online, and I didn't want to lose this gig, so to speak. But I said, I got to be honest with you. I said, I'm a Division IV football coach in San Diego, California. It's not Florida, Texas. You know, I'm not Division I. Why me? And I said, I believe in my abilities, but why me? And they said, Coach, our business owners are all either former athletes, or if they're not former athletes, they're competing now. They're in the world of competing in business. They
Yeah.
want to hear from someone that's living it, has lived it, that's doing it. So I went out there, and that entire plane ride out there, and the entire time building up and preparing the speech, I kept on allowing my ego, edging God out, to creep in.
Mhm.
Personally, for me, it was just through a lot of prayer, just saying, God, I'm going to trust you. Just let me focus on not the number of people that are there, but the audience, and that audience of 1 or 2 or 20 or whatever it is. The cool thing that's happened is just about 6 months ago, I was asked to speak up in LA. No offense to the people in LA. I'm not a fan of the city just because of the traffic, but I was speaking at a Glazier clinic, and I looked at the agenda, and I was speaking at the same time as 2 gentlemen that I did not want to speak at the same time with.
Mhm.
It was, Coach Sarkeesian from Texas,
Mhm.
and I forget the gentleman's name, but the head strength and conditioning coach from the LA Rams, who just won the Super Bowl. So I said to my wife, who had driven up with me, I said, I'm going to be speaking to an audience of none, or one coach who read the sign wrong on the door and went into the wrong room, you know. But I really did. I really did prepare myself for that. And I said, listen, I wouldn't want to hear me speak if I could go hear these two speak. And both rooms had 40 plus, 60 plus. You know, I spoke 2 different times. People in the room, and it was kind of an aha moment for me of. And you mentioned something off camera, Coach, before we started. You said something of, you know, we're not competitors. You and I have the same mission, passion. We're doing very similar things. And it really was an aha moment for me of, the world is not, and I don't think will ever be, ever overpopulated with men or women who want to spread positivity. And
Awesome.
our platforms happen to be through coaching and
Yeah.
mentoring,
Yeah.
leadership.
Yeah.
But man, I put it out there sometimes. Another thing I'm not proud of, and you didn't ask, but I'll share it anyways. I've gotten over this. I used to have a thought come to my mind and think, oh, I should do a video. And then, not proud of this, I would think, I wonder if it'll get a lot of retweets.
Yeah.
Who cares? Who cares?
Yeah.
Now I truly can say I'm at that point now where I have enough faith and confidence and belief, not only in myself, but in what I'm sharing, that, listen, if it gets one like, if one, and I mean this to my core, if one person listens to it and it helps bless them, then that's fantastic. And one of the coolest, most recent, powerful things for me was, I'm not sure if you saw it or not. I wear my heart on my sleeve. I'll try not to get emotional now. When my father passed away, I had done a video, and I was a sobbing, so just snot bubble mess. And I remember saying in the video, like, I don't know why I'm doing this. Maybe it's my own healing process, whatever it is. And I just spoke for about a minute or so about the passing of my father, about the man he was and the man he helped me become. I promise you, I didn't give a rat's tail if that got one retweet, but I wanted to put my heart out there. It ended up getting over 200 retweets. And the coolest thing that I'll never forget, and the reason I say that's cool is other people that were touched by it
All
and
right.
felt enough to
Yeah.
share it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had so many people direct message me, and one woman, I don't remember her name, and I wouldn't share it anyways, and I'm paraphrasing, but said something like, Coach, my husband and I have not heard from our son in 20 years. I sent him your video,
Wow.
and he just called. And
Wow.
I thought, you know what? Through tragedy, God is
Yeah.
so good that through our tragedy, through our heartbreak, if we
Mhm.
are humble enough, He's going to use our pain for someone else's purpose.
Yeah. And the other, I'll add on to that. Your dad's legacy
Yes.
still lives on.
Yes.
He may not be here physically, but his legacy through you lives on. How cool is that?
So cool. And the timing,
Got
Joe,
goosebumps.
the timing, amen. And I love that. The timing was just yesterday, last night. My son, I have 3 daughters who are 24 through 31, and my son's 25. He texted me. He said, Dad, when's your football season go till? So I said, well, mid-November, depending on how we do in the playoffs or whatever. And I said, why do you ask? And he goes, well, I'm thinking about possibly, coaching with you, because I'd asked him several years ago. And he just committed this morning, came to the first practice.
All right.
Coach Hines 2.0, so to speak. And I mentioned to him, I said, Brock, I said, I'm not going to get emotional right now. Kids were just coming to the weight room. I said, I'm not going to get emotional now. I said, but driving over the bridge here this morning, I thought, For the past 25 years I've coached, I call my dad every Saturday morning after a Friday night game. He's on our huddle account. He watches the games, and I talk to him. And I realize that there will be times that I go to pick up this phone
Yeah.
and go, oh crap, I can't call him.
Yeah.
I'll call mom, and she'll pretend that she cares about football.
Yeah.
She cares about me, but she doesn't care
Yeah.
about football.
Yeah.
And I said to Brock, I said, my dad would, I said, Pa, you know, they call him Pa, would love that. And he looked at me and goes, that's one of the main reasons I want to coach with you.
That
So
is awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. What a great story. I know you got to get going. I have 3 questions for you. I wrote a book. It's called The 3 Ps, Finding Your Purpose, Perspective, and Passion. And I ask every person I have on my podcast those 3 questions. What is your purpose in life? What's your purpose?
My purpose is to live the life that God created me to live. I know I've said this probably the 3rd time now, but I know who I am, whose I am, and why I'm here. That's my purpose.
Okay. I'm going to skip over perspective and go to passion. I'll tell you why here in a minute, but what's your passion?
My passion is in empowering others. Yeah.
Okay.
And God has blessed me with the platform as a teacher, as a coach, as a husband, a father, and a grandfather to empower as many people as I can.
And I tell people all the time, and I've had people challenge me on this, which is okay. Your purpose usually equals your passion, and your passion usually equals your purpose. And what holds it together is your perspective.
Yeah.
If you get outside your perspective, then all of a sudden you're outside your purpose and passion most of the time. So what's your perspective on life? That holds those together.
Yeah. Every day is a gift.
Yeah.
I think, and once again, I'm guilty of this myself. And I think most great leaders are humble enough to grow from their own defeats. And all the things we go through. I think most of us need to rejoice in the mundane. I think we get on this rat race of, it's Monday, Tuesday, it's hump day, it's Wednesday, hey, it's Thursday, Friday. And then our whole mindset changes. And every day I get up and get out of bed is a blessing. Every day I get a chance to go to the classroom and stand in front of my 4th graders and stand in front of our high school football players is a blessing. And every time when I go home another hour and a half from now and see my wife, it's a blessing. My perspective is, as cliche, and I'm sure there's not a listener you have that hasn't heard this before, but we're not promised tomorrow.
Yeah.
You know? And the next time I think about calling my mom and go, I'll get it to it tomorrow. What if? What if I don't get that chance? You know? And yeah, my perspective is every day is a blessing.
And I think that's awesome. And we didn't tell people here that you're actually a 4th grade teacher.
Yes, sir.
Man, would I love to have my 4th grade son or daughter have you as their teacher. I think
I appreciate that.
Cool, man.
And I'll tell you too, I know we're going to wrap up in 3 minutes or here, give or take, but people for years would say, how do you do 4th grade elementary school? And high school football? For me, they're the exact same thing, because my 4th graders and our football players want to know that they're heard, they're loved, and that they make a difference.
Right.
And I've had so many parents come to me as parents of my students saying, oh, so-and-so used to hate math, now they love it. They used to hate reading, now they love it. I don't think I'm a better teacher than others, but I take time every day to sit in the floor in a circle with my 4th graders and talk about them, their life. And because go back to those relationships, because I know they know I care about them as people.
Yeah.
They want to impress Mr. Hines. They want to make sure they do their homework for Mr. Hines, whatever it is. And every day's a blessing.
I call it get to have to.
Yes.
Your students get to go to your class instead of have to go to your class. Yeah. Just think if our world was like that. If I lead a business, do my workers get to come to work, or do they have to come to work?
Yeah.
How much more production do you get out of your students when they get to come to school instead of have to go to school? And that's all started by developing that rapport, developing that relationship, letting them know how much you care about them, how much you respect them, how much you empathize with them, and those things. We could go on probably for 3 hours. Yeah. So maybe we might have to do podcast number 2 sometime.
I would love to.
I appreciate you so much. You have no idea, not just for what you did today, but for what you're doing for the world in general. It's amazing. And what you gave me today is amazing. And I appreciate everything that you do. Thank you for so much. Oh, how can people get a hold of you? I'm sorry. Your Twitter and all that.
More importantly, before I forget that, I appreciate you, Joe. I really do. Just your energy and passion. So thank you, thank you, thank you. My just like we tell our players, don't have fast cleats 72 or whatever. Have your real name. It's Coach Kurt Hines, Kurthines. It's the same on Twitter, Instagram, on all the social media platforms.
Okay.
And I make it a point that anyone that sends me a message, I will always respond, because none of us are
You
greater than each
did.
other. So
You responded right away to me.
I'm glad I did.
Oh.
I'm blessed for this relationship, and I'm excited to stay connected.
Yeah, we're going to continue this for sure. I'm going to hold you accountable for that.
Please do.
I appreciate you coming on, and I want to thank everyone for listening to the People Progressing podcast. What a great day today. Get on, listen to it, download it. All we're trying to do, just like Coach Hines said, is just affect one person. If it affects one, if it affects 1,000, it affects 1,000. But we're just trying to make a difference. So please listen, and please support us. And hopefully you have a good day and keep progressing.